Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, we are going to talk a little bit about this three-game series, or the first three games of the six-game series, however you want to call it, with the Rockies. Dodgers have won 2 out of 3 so far with 3 games left to go in the series and the season. We are in the final week of the season. Going to talk a little bit about that series. We're going to start looking forward to the postseason roster. Going to talk about some guesses about who might be there, who might not be for health reasons or effectiveness reasons or just roster crunch reasons. So all that to get to. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. This is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you'll never miss a day because we're not going to. If this is your first time watching or listening, my name is Jeff Snider. My co-host is Vince Samperio. We are doing a split episode today, so I will be with you for the first half. Vince will be with you for the second half. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. And I just want to remind you, as we get closer to the postseason and then the off season, Locked On Dodgers will continue to be 5 days a week, pretty much every single week. And, even in the off season, so far, Vince and I have been doing Locked On Dodgers in this format for 3.5 years, since March of 2019. And we have never missed a weekday, and we don't plan on starting now. Obviously, the shows are different in the off season, and they're more intense in the postseason. But we will keep coming to you every weekday morning. So be sure to subscribe, check it out, get your baseball fix all off season. But before we start talking about the off season, there's still a lot of regular season left, a little bit of regular season left, and a lot of postseason left. And even the little bit of regular season feels like maybe a lot, because there's a few things that the Dodgers still playing for. Really, actually, at this point, there's one thing the Dodgers are playing for, and they can accomplish that today on Monday. If they beat the Rockies, that would be their 111th win, which would officially make them the best team in Dodgers franchise history. They already have the most wins in franchise history, but both the 1953 Brooklyn Dodgers and the 1899 Brooklyn Superbas had slightly better winning percentages than this current team does. Getting to 111 wins would give the Dodgers, the 2022 Dodgers, the best winning percentage in franchise history, to go along with the most wins in franchise history. They'll top out. The most games they can win this season is 113, and that's no record or anything as far as the league goes. So really, they're just playing it out. They're playing to stay healthy. That's the main goal. And along those lines, Chris Taylor currently isn't healthy. He has missed the last couple days with a neck issue. Dave Roberts actually said it's not good. They do consider Taylor day-to-day still, but having Chris Taylor missing right now is interesting, and it kind of segues into what I want to talk about today, which is looking at the postseason roster. And we've talked a lot about the pitching staff, and we're going to talk some more today about the pitching staff, about who might be on it, who might not be. But now with Taylor being hurt, with Joey Gallo being ineffective, it opens up a few questions on the position player side. Even Hanser Alberto, he's had a couple of hits recently, but he's not anything to write home about. Miguel Vargas is showing some signs of, showing that hitting prowess that had prospect hounds so excited about him. I absolutely believe Vargas is going to be a very good major league hitter. It didn't look, for the first few weeks he was called up, it didn't look like that was going to be this season, but now he's showing some signs at least. He's putting together good at bats and maybe getting a little more confidence. And so it starts to make you think, even before the Chris Taylor issue, it was like, okay, Gallo hasn't been good. Would it be worth putting Vargas on the postseason roster over Gallo? Now, Vargas over Gallo is a major defensive hit. Despite on Sunday, Gallo did have a ball that he lost in the sun, misplayed a fly out into a triple. But that's a sun ball. And it's not like Vargas would have done much better. Mookie Betts probably would have if he had been in right field. But it was Gallo out there Betts has been remarkable in his ability to handle the sun at Dodger Stadium this year. Gallo is not the first right fielder we've seen have issues on a ball this year. He is the first Dodgers right fielder we've seen have those issues. So, but still, the underlying point is Joey Gallo is still a very good defensive outfielder. Miguel Vargas isn't. He's good. He's a good athlete, and he's been working. Mookie Betts was actually working with him in the outfield, and who better to learn from than one of the best outfielders in baseball. But right now, Miguel Vargas would definitely be a step back from Gallo defensively. Obviously, he doesn't bat from the same side of the plate as Gallo, so it's not a direct replacement necessarily if you are concerned about handedness. But right now, I think I would trust Miguel Vargas more than Joey Gallo to put up a good at bat. I think Gallo probably has more potential to do something explosive, but he's also a lot more likely to strike out. And, like we saw in the game against whoever it was, the Padres last week, when Gallo himself stranded 8 runners on base, striking out with bases loaded 2 different times, 4 strikeouts in the game. Rough time for Gallo. And, nothing's set in stone. Even if he doesn't make the first roster, they could still bring him back, whatever, vice versa. But so I was already thinking about Vargas on the roster. Now with Taylor, it's like, okay, now that really, if Taylor is unable to go, and we're still, as I'm recording this, we're still 9 days away. As you're listening to it, we're still 8 days away from the first postseason game. And so there's no necessarily reason to think Chris Taylor won't be ready to go by the NLDS, but Gavin Lux missed plenty of time with a neck issue. And if it's bad enough that Chris Taylor's not playing, Taylor wasn't exactly setting the world on fire anyway. And so how's he going to be coming back cold after missing however much time it is? And so it could be a thing where they would want to send him to Arizona to the Stay Hot camp and for the first series, get some live at bats and try to be ready for the NLCS or something. Between those two things, it seems like there's a possibility that a spot is opening up for Miguel Vargas, and maybe even 2 spots, because Gallo isn't getting any better right now. And so maybe Gallo and Taylor both need to be replaced. And then you start thinking, well, would they consider bringing up James Outman? They said that basically they didn't call up Outman because what they have on the current roster is what they're considering for the postseason. But with the way things change, Outman might be a possibility. Kevin Pillar might be a possibility. Pillar is on the 60-day injured list, so that would be a little bit trickier. They'd have to take somebody off the 40-man roster to get Pillar in. But all in all, there's some openings there and there's some possibilities. And I think having Outman playing every day in the minors this past month has him in a better position right now to contribute in the postseason than he would have been if he had been on the Dodgers major league roster this September and getting sparse playing time. So it's kind of interesting looking forward to what the roster might look like on the position player side because of the injury to Taylor, because of the ineffectiveness of Gallo, maybe even Hanser Alberto thrown in there of being ineffective. I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about the pitching side, and there's still just as many questions there as we've had it all basically this whole season. Nothing has really been answered super well. And so I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about some of my thoughts on who will and won't make the postseason, or at least the NLDS roster for the Dodgers on the pitching side. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. Hey, if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. You ready? It's delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite, cookie dough chunk puffs. They have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. I've been reading. I'm going to stop reading. I've had these things. They are so good. It's like a marshmallow with cookie dough and chocolate, and it's not bad for you. It's actually good for you. They are delicious. It's my favorite snack right now is the cookie dough chunk Built Bar Puff. If you haven't gotten any, I promise you're going to love them. Try them. They are delicious. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15. Remember that promo code changed a month or so ago. It's now locked on 15 to get 15% off your order. That's promo code locked on 15 for 15% off at built.com. Okay, I am back. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. It really does mean a lot to us. Vincent, I love talking Dodgers with you. We are going to, this week, I mentioned last week our approach right now. Vince and I are both also load managing to prepare for the postseason. I think we'll be together with you for a lot of the postseason on these episodes, talking to each other. But that's why we've been doing more solo episodes, an occasional split episode like today, to let us both kind of gear up and get ready for the postseason. But we'll probably do an episode or two together this week. We'll just have to see how things play out. But last thing I want to talk about before I turn it over to Vince is the postseason roster on the pitching side of things. And this is still really, really tricky because right now you have 3 guys on the injured list who have valid claims at a roster spot if they get healthy. And that's Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May, and Blake Treinen. All 3 of those guys, if they're healthy, they will be on the postseason roster. Blake Treinen is probably the biggest question mark. Tony Gonsolin is coming off the IL today to start against the Rockies. So assuming that goes well, we'll have a lot more answers there about Gonsolin's health. Dustin May threw a bullpen session on Sunday, I believe. And Dave Roberts said he liked the intensity of it, the energy. Everything sounds promising there. Blake Treinen threw lightly off a mound. He'll be throwing a bullpen session today. And right now it's still very much up in the air about whether Treinen will be back in time for the NLDS or not. But if he is, if those 3 guys are ready, they're all going to be on the roster for the NLDS. Rosters right now are at 28. They'll go back down to 26 for the playoffs and 13 pitchers. So right now the Dodgers are carrying 14 pitchers. They have to cut that down to 13. So 1 guy on the active roster isn't going to make it anyway. And they have those 3 guys coming back. And so I just want to look at if all 3 of those guys come back healthy and are ready for the NLDS, which 4 guys who are currently on the roster are we going to cut? Now, there's only one that is a for sure thing, I think, and that's Andre Jackson. Jackson was just recalled on Sunday. Michael Grove went on the injured list. He took a liner off the knee, and it seems like they were not happy that Grove got hurt. That's not quite the way I mean to phrase that, but it worked out well. The Dodgers didn't have to use any relief pitchers on Sunday, even though they lost. Tyler Anderson went 5 innings. Andre Jackson went the last 4 innings, and that was it. Alex Vesia did have to warm up in the bullpen a little bit at the end because Jackson struggled in the 9th. But all in all, they didn't have to use the bullpen, so that's why Andre Jackson was there. And presumably after throwing 4 innings, he will be the guy optioned today when Gonsolin is activated. So that gets Jackson off. It gets Gonsolin back, which means there's still 3 more guys we have to cut from this roster to make room for May and Treinen and account for having 1 fewer pitcher on the roster. So there's some guys who are totally safe. And I'm not going to bother going through all of those, but I'm going to mention the ones who I think are most on the bubble. And honestly, if we're cutting 3 guys, I think this is the 3 guys I would cut. And there's a couple reasons why I'm not totally sure about that. Basically, I would go with David Price, Caleb Ferguson, and Craig Kimbrell being the guys who don't make the roster for the NLDS. Price and Ferguson is a little bit tricky just because they're both lefties. That would leave Alex Vesia and Andrew Heaney as the only lefties in the bullpen. But the Dodgers have a lot of guys who can be effective against both righties and lefties. Most of their right-handers are pretty darn good against lefties. Not all of them, but most of them. And so I don't know that you need, especially with the 3 batter minimum, left-handed specialists aren't as big a deal as they used to be. Vesia obviously deserves a spot. Ferguson has been struggling lately, and I still think he's a very good pitcher, and I think he can contribute this postseason, but I think he would be one of the guys off the NLDS roster for me to start. Price just came back for the injured list. He's fine, but I don't think he brings anything to the table that you don't get better from somebody else. And then Kimbrell. As much as I've said all season, Kimbrell's got great stuff. He's going to figure it out, or I hoped he would, and it made sense for the Dodgers to give him a chance to figure it out. Right now, he is not dominant enough to say, yeah, he deserves a spot. And if he can go to Arizona, face some hitters there, do whatever, work on that command. Maybe he gets a spot later. And sometimes these questions get answered by the injury bug. And so this is all based on the very, very iffy proposition of everybody being healthy. But I think those three guys are the guys I would say, sorry, which gives you a postseason and NLDS pitching roster of Gonsolin, May, and Trinan returning from injury, plus Yency Almonte, Tyler Anderson, Brewstar Gratterall, Tommy Canley, Clayton Kershaw, Chris Martin, Evan Phillips, Julio Urias, and Alex Vesia. That's a pretty darn good pitching staff. You've got a couple guys there who have been starters all season and would be pitching more in a relief role. Heaney and May, probably a lot of there would still be a lot of questions about how they would deploy those guys, but I would feel pretty good about that 13-man pitching staff heading into October. I think that's probably the one that gives you the best chance to be dominant. Obviously, some of it might depend on who they're playing. If they are playing the Padres, if the Padres can get past the first round, they're playing the Padres. Maybe they want a lefty guy because of Juan Soto, but Soto bats right next to Machado, and you definitely want to right against Machado. So, there's things, matchup possibilities that might come into play when they're making the roster. But if you're going with the 13 best pitchers, I think that's it. And speaking of that's it, I think that's it for me today. Vince is going to come talk to you. I don't know exactly what he has planned. He and I haven't coordinated much other than, hey, let's do a split episode. So I've talked roster stuff. Vince might talk more about the 3 games of the Rockies series so far that we haven't talked much about over the weekend. But whatever it is, thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. And Vince will be along in a minute.
Yo, Dodger fans, Vince here to close out the episode. Thank y'all for listening to the earlier part with Jeff. And I'm here to talk just a little bit about some of these games over the weekend with the Rockies, the Dodgers, this last 6-game series. If you want to split it up into 2 3-game series, the Dodgers won the first half of the 3-game series, 2-1. They dominated on Friday night. The Rockies were adamant on giving away the game on Saturday, and then the Dodgers couldn't quite get it done on Sunday, even though the Rockies tried to give them the game again. But all in all, 2 out of 3 wins. And for the Dodgers, we've heard all the talk about, we're still trying to win every game. We're still going out there and everything else. And, I still believe that, but I got to imagine that just subconsciously some of the players are not checked out, but they're just, ready to get into the games that matter again. And it's a little bit tough. So that's why Friday night's game was fun. The Dodgers put up 8 runs in the 4th inning that day. And up and down the lineup, they got contributions from a lot of guys. Mookie Betts had 3 hits. Will Smith had 2 hits. Cody Bellinger had 2 hits, including a 3-run home run. And yeah, it was just a fun night overall. They put up 10. Hanser, I guess the blemish was Hanser pitched the 9th and gave up a run, pushing his ERA over 4 now on the season. But other than that, you got 6 innings from Kershaw. Didn't strike out too many, but was pitching a lot to contact. He did give up 5 hits, did walk a couple, but was able to pitch out of it. And then you had Yency Almonte, who's looked good so far in his return. He had a couple of strikeouts. And then David Price threw an inning, and then Hanser Alberto threw an inning. So, yeah, Friday night was one of those games that after the 4th inning, it kind of just became, okay, nobody get hurt. Mookie came out, Freddie came out, Muncy came out. It was a game that the Dodgers were able to get some guys off their feet, not have to worry about anything. And, one of those games that's fun. The Dodgers offense had been struggling a little bit. It was nice to see them take advantage of not great pitching and put up some runs. You move over to Saturday, and it was a game you were like, oh man, the Dodgers might lose this one. It was 4-1, getting into the 7th inning, and like I said, just knowing that, yeah, you're trying to win every game, but that it's not necessarily a sense of, oh my God, we need to win this game. But then the Rockies pitchers started walking guys. The Dodgers ended up that night with 10 walks, and they ended up putting up 3 runs in the 7th, 2 runs in the 8th. It went from a 4-1 deficit to a 6-4 lead. The bullpen held it down, and it ended up being, another fun night at the Ravine. Michael Gross started that game. He went 5 innings, gave up 4 runs. he'd been pretty effective recently and starts this game. I guess, for a number 5 starter for a young guy coming up, 4 innings and 5 runs isn't terrible. But he, did give up a pair of home runs, which has been a little bit of an issue for him so far this season. He probably won't see him in October, so, not as big a deal. But when you see the guys that came in after him that didn't give up any runs, that's a little bit better of a deal. You had Craig Kimbrell come in the 6th. You had Tommy Kahnle, Evan Phillips, Brusdar Graterol, all through scoreless innings. Kimbrell did walk 2, didn't give up a hit, but did walk 2. So, hasn't been lights out. Was able to not allow a run, but you still walked a couple, which is not ideal, which is why, again, I still don't think he's going to be on that October roster, but, that remains to be seen. But good sign, Kahnle, Phillips, Graterol all looked good, all put up zeros, and it was, fun to watch. Sunday was similar to Saturday in the sense that the Dodgers offense didn't do anything the first few innings, except this time they continue not to do anything throughout the end of the game. The good thing is they got to save their bullpen a little bit. Tyler Anderson went 5, struck out 10, so he wasn't as efficient with the pitch count because he was striking out so many guys. He had over 20 swings and misses, and one of those nights that we're not used to seeing with Tyler Anderson, first double-digit strikeout game as a Dodger. But still, good to see that in essence he can have a game like that. But like I said, he ran out of pitches earlier than normal. 86 pitches through 5 innings. He could have gone another one. He probably would have gone another one if this was, a more important game or a postseason game. But he gave the Dodgers what they needed. And then luckily for them, they got Andre Jackson to finish out the game, so they didn't have to use anyone else in the bullpen. He cruised through the first 3 innings, and then an error and a few hits in the top of the 9th ended up doing him in. He ended up giving up 2 runs. But yeah, Andre Jackson has looked good. If in a pinch, if there's a couple injuries or something that happens, I would be comfortable seeing Andre Jackson pitch in October. Obviously not in a featured role, but if he was like the 13th pitcher on the roster, the Dodgers could do a lot worse than that. But we'll probably won't see him, and if we do, that means a lot of things happened. The other 2 things I wanted to note over the weekend: Cody Bellinger had a pretty solid weekend. He ended up driving in 6 runs. He had 5 hits, had that 1 home run that I mentioned. Only struck out once the entire weekend against the Rockies. And yes, you can say, yes, this is Rockies pitching, blah, 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 but Bellinger hasn't discriminated who he's been bad against this season. So for him to go a whole weekend with only striking out once and getting multiple at-bats, it's a sight for sore eyes, I guess. We don't have too many sore eyes watching the Dodgers these days, but we have had some sore eyes watching Bellinger this season. So he's up to 206 of hitting on the season, OPS 646. At this point, those numbers don't matter, but as long as he's putting forward good at-bats, Chris Taylor being out and potentially being out for NLDS just solidifies his spot over there in center field, which I didn't really think there was going to be any question of who was going to be in center field for the Dodgers, considering they've stuck with him pretty much the entire season and didn't really give anyone else, a shot over there in center. Belly was been in the lineup pretty much night in, night out. One guy that's, slightly concerning, he did have a 2-hit game on Saturday, but Trey Turner is now under 200, or not under 200, under 300 on the season. We've talked about that he was struggling a little bit before. You look over the last 2 weeks, last 15 games, he's hitting just 228 with a 263 slugging percentage, has as many strikeouts as hits, 13 strikeouts, 13 hits. And it's concerning because last year we saw him struggle in the postseason, and now we're getting close to the postseason, and you're not necessarily getting the most confidence from seeing him at the plate. Sometimes he had a couple bad strikeouts before this series and the previous series. He just hasn't quite looked like the Trey Turner we saw part of the season, but he's a guy that can get it going, get it hot. We've seen him have multiple 15 game plus hitting streaks this season. It's just a matter of can he do it now, and hopefully he does get it done now, because the Dodgers are gonna need Mookie, Trey, and Freddie to be the main catalyst for this October run, because everyone else can contribute and will contribute, but you got to get the stuff out of your big three at the top of the order. And Mookie and Trey have struggled a little bit over here the last month or so. Freddie's been pretty steady. Freddie's close to winning a batting title and all that. Him and Trey are still 1-2 in terms of hits in the National League, but Freddie's got a lead and has about 30-point lead in batting average. So, there wasn't too much to draw from this weekend, but other than it was nice to see Bellinger put the bat on the ball. It was nice to see the bullpen, all the guys that are going to make an impact this October in the bullpen. All of them had clean innings. Now we get to see Tony Gonsolin on Monday, see what he can bring and see what he looks like. And these last 3 days are basically just please don't get hurt. And last year we saw the Dodgers lost Kershaw and Max Muncy in the last series of the season. Both of them were not able to contribute in October, and it, definitely didn't help the Dodgers. I don't know if it makes a difference, and they beat the Braves in the NLCS, but obviously it would make some kind of difference. At the very least, Max Scherzer wouldn't have probably had to throw in that game against the Giants in Game 5, and maybe his arm would have been rested up, and he would have thrown. There's a lot of different scenarios that could have happened, but at this point, it's don't get hurt. Really, the last final spots on the roster are kind of Gallo, Vargas, Hanser type thing. Everybody else probably locked in at this point. Lux and Trace and those guys probably have guaranteed spots on the roster. Bullpen wise, you're probably still playing a couple things. That's mainly what's going to get figured out these next 3 games. Although I would imagine the Dodgers already have the roster in mind, and they're just making sure that everybody is ready and fresh and good to go. So that's what we're looking for these next 3 days. It was good to win the last 2 out of 3 just because, winning is more fun. And the Dodgers are up to 110 wins, the first National League team with that many wins since 1909 Pirates. So all in all, fun weekend. The Dodgers got 3 more, and then we have a 5-day wait until the stress of October hits. So let's get ready for that. That's going to do it for me. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Check out Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan. He's got the #1 daily league-wide podcast that's available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. That's where we're available as well, on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. I just got to look for Locked On Dodgers. You can also look for Locked On Dodgers on social media, Twitter and Instagram. Jeff is on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Samperio. You can call and leave us a voicemail or send us a text at 323-863-5625, or you can send us an email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us. When you get in your car or if you're at home, taste my advice, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.